My name is Garrett Lang. I'm a software developer turned software inventor here in North Jersey. I'm also an entrepreneur, and my hobby is writing and discussing practical philosophy, a lot of which I present. Tonight will be one of the times that I present my ideas. I also am the executive director of the Freethinker Institute, which is the organization that brings you tonight's event. We advertise to a lot of different places, but the Freethinker Institute is the source of this event, and we are a not-for-profit looking to support and empower members to help us be the best versions of ourselves, to seek truth and to be fair, which is the first of the five intentions, which are things that I think we should all be intending to do all the time. That's kind of the North Star. And if you look at our website, you can see the other four intentions. Or in Q&A, if people want to know what they are, they can ask. And we do that through transformational personal and professional development. We have free events like this one every Tuesday evening, covering a wide range of topics not typically covered in academia or industry. And we also have weekly members only events where we apply practical wisdom into our daily lives, get to know a new friend group at a very deep level, and do peer coaching and mentoring. We have in-person events in North Jersey and New York City on a regular basis. So for anyone in the North Jersey or New York City area, we would love to have you at our events. If you want to be invited to them, you can join the Freethinker Institute meetup where all of our events are offered, or if you want calendar invites, I'm putting my email in the chat and we can invite you to all of our events in whatever area you're interested in. I'm also going to put a Google Doc that helps you learn more about the Freethinker Institute. I put that into the chat. And then we have only one rule, and I'll ask everyone to follow it tonight, like I do all the time in all FTI communities, and that is to remain polite. You can say anything you want. You can even say things that most people would find offensive, as long as you say it politely. We are believers in free speech, but we want it to be polite speech because no one's going to listen to you, quite frankly, if you're not polite. So you're better off being polite in the first place. And we find that we have much better conversations in this community because people do follow the rule to be polite. I also recommend when you disagree with someone, rather than getting emotional and upset and saying why they're wrong and you're right, it's much better to listen with empathy and do what we call listening to understand in the FTI, where you ask them thoughtful questions about why they came to the conclusion that they did when you might think it's outrageous and crazy. You'll learn a lot more from understanding why they came to that conclusion than you will telling them they're wrong and you're right. So we try to listen to understand in the FTI community. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and go into the presentation. Um, and give me 1 second to get all my screens aligned. And I have three screens, so I'll be looking in different areas. Sorry if I'm not giving you eye contact, but that's just because I have three monitors. That's my tech background. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this important discussion. I'm going to basically critique the current counterterrorism strategies and explore a new approach that I'm proposing. It centers on justice, compassion, understanding, aiming to reduce terrorism by addressing root causes and promoting unity rather than revenge and retribution, I'll add. We'll also examine whether current strategies are effective or if it's about time for a change. So, despite the ongoing counterterrorism efforts, global terrorism continues to pose a significant threat. The Global Terrorism Index, the GTI, in 2023 reports that while there have been improvements in some areas, the overall situation is very concerning. Now, there are certain regions that bear disproportionate impact. So, South Asia remains the region with the worst average GTI scores in 2022. 1,300, over 1,300 deaths from terrorism, which is a decrease of 30% compared to the prior year. Excluding improvements in Afghanistan, terrorism deaths in the region would have increased by 71% at the time. And obviously, that's probably gotten much worse. So, current counterterrorism strategies like military interventions and restrictive policies can actually contribute to the problem, and these approaches basically create resentment and serve as propaganda tools for extremist groups, providing aid to their recruitment efforts. The GTI notes that after substantial improvements between 2016 and 2019, progress has basically plateaued, with both attacks and deaths remaining roughly the same since 2019. So we're not progressing in this really important um, uh, situation. So I will, by the way, give A little bit of credit to Trump. A lot of people that come here regularly know I don't do that very much, but the trend of I'll give a little credit to that the trend began before Trump of terrorist caused deaths declining under Trump's presidency. But I will also say that I don't think that the gains during Trump's presidency were sustainable because civilian casualties also went up during the time that terrorist acts went down. So that also makes it easier for terrorists to recruit because there are higher civilian deaths. So while there was a little bit of gain, there was, two steps forward, two steps backwards, in my opinion. So, basically, current counterterrorism strategies focus on three main areas: installing governments that align with specific political interests, isolating and targeting terrorists, and restricting immigration from regions associated with terrorism. While these are trying to disrupt the terrorist operations in some cases, and trying to prevent terrorists from coming to our safe, cushy lives in the United States, where we've had very few terrorist actions, although one very big one on 9/11, of course, that we all know. But for the most part, we've been very largely unaffected by international terrorism, although we do have a fair amount of domestic terrorism, which is another story that we covered when we talked about gun violence another night. So I'm not going to recover that. But for people that want to learn about what we talked about, I can tell you what I proposed as a solution for that. It's a little different than what we're talking about today. So there are also a lot of unintended consequences with these sort of current methods, which include resentment, recruiting opportunities for terrorists, and really cycles of violence that we see, for example, in the Middle East for millennia. Um, these strategies fail because they alienate the populations that they're aiming to protect. Undemocratic policies like installing puppet governments provide terrorist groups with propaganda to recruit more followers. Similarly, military actions often result in civilian casualties, reinforcing the idea that foreign governments are the oppressors. And immigration restrictions on places that have terrorists exacerbate this issue by isolating peaceful members of communities in those countries and making them more vulnerable to radicalization because they're not able to escape the country where some of them, and probably the ones that are fighting for the most good in those countries, are the ones that are the most targeted by terrorists. And so we're taking the people who should be our biggest allies and we're making them the most vulnerable by banning them from coming to the US. And those people normally would be able to seek asylum in the US, but for the fact that, they're often banned from coming here. So I'm going to make a proposal that it's time for a change, and my slide notes disappeared. So essentially, I want to make sure that we tackle poverty, education gaps, and injustice, and create a culture of compassion and understanding, including cultural awareness of the areas that we're in, and ensure that we're being more fair amongst the communities that we're hoping to target. And so I'm going to go into a little bit about the proposal. I think that the persistent rise in terrorism highlights the urgent need for a shift in strategy. Instead of relying on force, I think we should address the root causes of extremism, which is poverty, lack of education, and feelings of injustice. And I would argue that justice, compassion, and understanding can counteract terrorist propaganda and reduce support for extremist ideologies. Essentially, what we're trying to do here is instead of winning the war on terror with guns and bullets, we're trying to win the hearts and minds of the population themselves. Because terrorists, if they aren't hidden by the people and the local members of the population, really have nowhere to hide. And so, they can't operate without a network of people that are supporting them. So, um, the strategy basically starts with governments adopting fair policies that ensure that they align with the principles of justice and compassion. Education is another critical component, particularly teaching vulnerable populations to see through terrorist propaganda. Like help people understand what reality is and what fairness is. And first of all, we have to be in the moral high ground before we can do this, right? Because very often the U.S. is not in the moral high ground, just speaking from a U.S. perspective, because that's where I am and that's the politics I know the best. we've often installed terrorist governments in other countries, which is not a good thing, obviously. And at that point, you don't have a lot of moral high ground if that's what you've done. But I think we can change. We can, install democratic governments in places that currently have authoritarian governments. And if we start doing that and we align with the principles of justice and compassion, local populations would be appreciative of that. And I can say that a place where we did that would have much lower incidences of terrorism because they would see that safe and equitable economic prosperity would come through the US's actions or through, I'm going to broaden it to be global and say, the United Nations actions, because really that's who I look to for, these types of movements forward is the United Nations, because it's an independent body that can say what they think is right and propose, things with international consensus. And so, that's, I think, the UN is a really good venue for introducing new things like this. So, finally, I think treating all communities, especially peaceful ones, with respect can only foster unity and reduce the us versus them mentalities that are often keeping, the terrorists afloat in populations that support them is by saying, someone mentioned earlier, the colonists, the colonizers, right? They're the evil ones. They're the colonizers. They're always going to be evil. They've always been evil. Well, what if the colonizers started doing really good things for the local population? Maybe that would change hearts and minds and trying to add value to people's lives and show that, justice and compassion are the MO of the governments that are currently running things. So let's talk about the role of education and truth. I would basically say that offering rehabilitation to surrendered terrorists, including psychological counseling, job training, and reintegration back in society, would be step number one. So the if you look back at there was a movie about this. I learned about it before the movie popularized it, but it was called Charlie Wilson's War. So for anyone that doesn't know why we had the 9/11 attacks, it actually is described really well in the movie Charlie Wilson's War. I recommend watching it. It's a great example of Hollywood actually sharing a before then not well-known truth, which is that we used the Mujahideen and the shoot, I'm blanking on the Al Qaeda to basically give Russia its own Afghanistan or its own Vietnam and Afghanistan. And then what we did is we took the terrorists that basically killed lots of Russians for us, and then we decided to just stop paying them. We didn't reincorporate them into society. And they got really angry at that. And so they vowed to get revenge on America for not paying them anymore. And then we had 9/11. So that's kind of the simplified historical account. Sorry if I spoiled the movie for you, but hopefully not. I still think it's well worth watching. The next step is supporting employment and addressing basic needs in regions affected by terrorism, including reducing, which would actually reduce the appeal of extremist groups. If you're helping people have a good, safe job where they're making a good living, they're not going to want to get recruited into a terrorist group when they have a lot to live for. But when you have someone who has little to live for and a lot to be angry about, they're much easier to recruit. And that, by the way, I've done research into this. That's not always the recruiting tool of recruiters. There are a lot of other things people recruit on, and there are a lot of middle class people. So economic prosperity alone is not a cure to terrorism. It's got to be multifaceted. You have to show that you will also have strong relationships with the community members and have a sense of trust and unity to counteract terrorism narratives. So when someone gets told by a terrorist, these colonizers are always horrible, well, then why did the colonizers come and help my sister with her broken leg last week? Right? That doesn't sound like a terrible, terrorizing colonizer. That sounds like someone who actually helped us when we were in a time of need. And so if you create stories that are, and make those stories of positive relationships with community members and the government actually the norm instead of, the non-existent, the non-existence that we often have with the populations that we're trying to influence these days, or where we're trying to eliminate terrorists, I guess I should say. And we're not trying to influence those whole communities for the positive all the time. I think we would find we would have much more success. So this includes also giving terrorists an out that says, look, if you wave the white flag and say you want to give up, we will take you in. We'll make sure that you end up getting job training, you get a job, you can rehabilitate back into society. We'll give you counseling to deal with the psychological transition from being a terrorist to being a citizen, and give someone a whole lot of support in that path. Then when that person is sitting there on a battlefield, like being, shot at, right? They're going to be thinking, you know what? If I just wave the white flag, I can put all this behind me and live a happy, peaceful life. That, when you put all of this together, where there's a positive narrative from the oppressors, from the community to the terrorists, right? This isn't going to be necessarily that the positive narrative goes straight from like a government to the terrorists. It's going to go from the government to the community that the government has to now start supporting instead of, not supporting them. And then from the community to the terrorists themselves, because those two interact, whether we like to believe it or not, they do. And so I think that that would have an effect that would move the needle. Now, next is the impact of compassionate policies. Terrorist groups often target children with propaganda, so schools have to counteract that by teaching, what do terrorists say, right? What is the way they recruit students? And guess what? These things are not true. These people will tell you this and, beat them to the punch because psychologically people believe the first story that they hear. So if these students hear, look, terrorists are going to come to you and try to recruit you by telling you this. But guess what? That's not true because your sister Sally just got helped last week by the government, and those are the people trying to help the terrorists give up their guns so that we can all be peaceful and happy and not have anyone fighting anymore. Um, now, I don't know if I guess one of the things that I think is key is that I'm not a fan of, and well, I may get to this in a later slide. If not, I'll bring it up again. So um, the only way that you can actually counter, like, help students be resilient to terrorist recruiting is by having the government actually be just and fair. And by winning the moral high ground through education, you basically weaken the appeal of extremist ideologies to younger generations. So implementing compassionate policies is actually, well, let me mention one thing, is that I think this was in my slide notes that got removed, but I actually think that instead of actively seeking out and hunting down terrorists when they might be in places where there are civilians around, or if they're even being hidden by shields, like human shields, I would recommend a defensive only stance. And this, I would have to talk with people who are more expert than me to know whether or not this is feasible or possible or could make any sense. But to me, the idea would be if you never attack the terrorists, but you only defend against them, and you have a good reason for the terrorists to give up and, stop, like basically stop being terrorists, then you don't ever create the antagonism or the deaths that help the terrorists recruit, right? Because you're only defending. And usually people have more compassion for someone who's defending themselves. You can say, okay, look, if someone comes at me with a gun, well, I feel okay shooting them, right? If they come at me with a gun saying, I'm going to shoot you, I don't mind shooting them. But I'm not going to go shoot someone just for fun, right? Or just because I want to aggress on them, but I would defend myself. And everyone understands self-defense. So if counterterrorism techniques went almost strictly, if not entirely, defensive, I think that would provide a good path towards moral high ground. Um, and I know that there would be logistical complications that would be interesting to talk with people who have more, and I'd be interested for the person with military background if he's done counterterrorism type of stuff to talk about that in the Q&A. So implementing compassionate policies has actually shown promise in countering violent extremism. Community engagement efforts like those involving former violent extremists and victims of terror can actually communicate the counter narrative, the counterterrorism narrative and reduce extremist rhetoric. Rehabilitation programs aimed at de-radicalization have achieved varying degrees of success. There was a study that found that while some initiatives effectively reduce the risk of re-engagement in terrorism, others lack clear criteria for measuring success. This highlights the need for more comprehensive evaluation frameworks to assess the effectiveness of rehabilitation programs. So notice it's not that they don't work, it's that sometimes they're not measured effectively, which says we're not even doing a good job of measuring effectively whether or not our rehabilitation programs are working. But the times that they're measured effectively, there have been degrees of success encountered. Next is inclusive policies that engage community members in prevention efforts are critical. You have to engage members of the community, including peers, teachers, law enforcement, community leaders, and it's essential to empower bystanders to identify and prevent individuals from radicalizing and mobilizing to violence before it occurs. Because when someone comes into the school and tries to recruit someone from to an extremist group, well, there's probably someone else who overheard that conversation. And if the person who overheard comes up to them and says, "Hey, Johnny, like you remember 3 weeks ago, the colonizers came in and brought us lots of food and they helped us out and they helped our families with medications that we needed." Like that creates a very different vibe than if Johnny goes to his friend and says, "Hey, this guy talked to me about, why this extremist group should, counter the horrible thing atrocities that happened to, over generations." And then the person responds, "Yeah, yeah, those people are always bad, those colonizers, right? They're always, taking away our land and, hurting our people." And so the peer network is super important. Peer teachers, law enforcement, and community leaders. Next is the findings actually suggest that compassionate, community-focused approaches play a significant role in reducing radicalization and fostering societal resilience against violent extremism. And by the way, I have in the presentation, which I'm going to have to make sure that it is shareable with you after this, because I use a new thing for my slide decks. But the slide decks have all my sources for the things that I'm saying. So all of this is there's a lot of sources for the stuff I'm saying. So I'm not going into all the statistics and details, but I'm keeping it a little bit high level for the conversation. But there are sources for anyone that wants to go into them. So next, to conclude, basically my critique emphasizes the need to replace fear-based strategies with those rooted in compassion and understanding. I think we should be addressing the root causes of terrorism, which are poverty, education, and justice. And I think that doing so can dismantle extremist recruitment pipelines and reduce the number of extremists in the ranks and foster unity amongst the populations that we're trying to help um, you know, that maybe sometimes we're not trying to help, but I think usually we are. We at least say we're trying to help them. Whether or not we are on the ground is something that I don't know for sure. But I'm going to give the government the benefit of the doubt that they are trying to help these populations. But I would argue that there's a new, better way to fight terrorism, and that's one that prioritizes humanity over hostility. And that's my presentation. And so, what we do in the questions, and thank you for raising your hand. Whenever you have questions, raise your hand. Please limit comments or questions to one comment or question at a time and limit the length of that comment or question to less than 2 or 3 minutes. If you want to respond to what someone just said, feel free to just speak up for less than 20 seconds and make a comment or ask a question that you want, and you don't have to raise your hand for that, but just keep it to under 20 seconds, and that way we can have some back and forth and around the table conversation. And with that said, Lenovo, I'm guessing that's not your name, but that's
Oh,
what the
sorry,
name of
that's
it.
sorry, that's my computer's name. Thank you, Garrett. I actually appreciate your comments about compassion and understanding, but I respectfully disagree with most of what you said. And I say this like I'm a person of color, and I think that the perspective I think is a very much like a Eurocentric white person's perspective. I don't think that the causes of terrorism are correct. I think and I think a big part of that is that Americans in particular don't know their history. And I think that serves for a lot of misinformation and propaganda, and the US as an aggressor. Um, and I also would disagree that the UN is an independent, partial. The UN is largely funded by the US, and the UN was created by the Allies, who were the colonizers. So I think there's like a lot to unpack, and I know I have a short amount of time, but I totally, completely disagree about even the language about moral high ground. Um, it's just because the poverty created was from colonization, was from slavery, and that just because formal colonization has ended, neo-colonialism hasn't, globalization hasn't, Americanization hasn't. So those factors are key into poverty, and I think the first step needs to be acknowledging this behavior, offering apology, and the Western powers, and in particular America, not coming in as the heroes, the superheroes, coming in with Eurocentric solutions that are not going to work, because have their own context, their own history. They can figure out their own solutions, but having European Western interference and creating the U.S. has created dependencies. They've made quote unquote the third world dependent
You're
on the
you're going
U.S.
into more than
Sorry,
I want to
sorry,
hear everything
sorry.
you have to say,
Okay,
but you're
but
going
sorry,
into
I
so
will
many
stop
things
there.
that I can't respond.
Yeah, sorry, but I just think that there's so much to unpack, and I'm
There
just
is.
saying
So let's
the
do it
history is not
one step at a time. Let me ask you a question.
sure.
Do you disagree with the research that I cited that said that compassionate approaches actually help to combat terrorism?
I don't I disagree with that. I come from a Buddhist approach, so I don't disagree with the compassion, but I think that there is going to be a lot of suspicion, and especially if a white person comes in and is telling people to be compassionate. Oh, that's not going to sit well at all. But I appreciate that effort. I appreciate what you're saying,
Well,
but
did I ever say that I expected a white person to come in and say that?
no. I'm not saying that you said that, but I'm just saying if that's like because there if it comes from a savior, like because you did make a few times that the colonizer came and they gave us this.
It was just a
Um,
random example. Like I'm
no,
just
I
talking
know, but
about that was
there's a
because someone
history of
brought it
this.
up.
There's
Yeah.
a history of that saviorism. I totally understand what you're saying, and the intentions are good, but I'm just coming at it from a different perspective, and it's something that I've studied like I did my PhD in this, so I'm just coming from that just to share that perspective of how it can be perceived. And that's all. I don't mean any disrespect at all.
Yeah, no, I'm not taking it as disrespectful. I'm just trying to understand what it was you disagreed with, because the one thing that I thought you disagreed with, it sounds like you didn't. And then the next thing that it sounded like you disagreed with wasn't something that I said. So when I clarified that, you agreed with that. So what was the part that you disagreed with?
I or maybe it's maybe the way it just you presented it, but like, and I don't know who you're saying is going to be doing this work, but like basically, like I think already like suggesting what the root of of terrorism is. Like I think that is not correct, and then coming with these prepackaged solutions about giving this and giving that. I just I just another way of like creating
I
that
think
that dependency. But I also disagree with even just using the word moral high ground, because I just don't think that's a good way to at least frame it, like in saying the moral high ground, just
So you're
considering that.
saying you don't think that doing the right thing is a good thing to say? Like we shouldn't
I
say
said
that we should do the right
that's not
thing.
what I said. I said using the word moral high ground.
So you think that using the word moral high ground doesn't mean doing the right thing?
That's not what I said at all. But
No,
I'm
I'm
going to just
trying to
leave it there
understand.
and let the people.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to understand like when I say having the moral high ground, I just mean doing the right thing, right? Like treating people with respect, and I used a lot of synonyms for that throughout the presentation, but you're picking on that particular phrase, but I don't know if you're picking on it in isolation or because you disagree with all the other things that I said were synonyms for it.
Um, like just because when you're like it creates that superiority, that's what I'm saying. It just like how, like we're all different, we all perceive information differently. So I'm telling you how I'm perceiving what you said, even if that's not your intention, because we all process information differently.
Right.
And that language to me is like, okay, whoever the person is, whoever's doing this work, whoever group, I don't really understand, like, who's doing this work, but it's like they are superior. They have a superior moral ground to then school, educate these terrorists or whoever. And but also the wording, like even the word terrorist, like it depends on who's saying it. Like because the U.S. can be considered a terrorist too, of all the things that they've done, right? It's like
I
who.
asserted that the U.S. has put in place
Yes,
terrorist
I know, and I
governance.
appreciate
So,
that. Yeah, I
yeah.
appreciate that you said. I appreciate that. So, but what I'm saying is, but when somebody thinks of, I'm not saying you is in you, but the general you, when we think of terrorists, like we don't think of the Western powers. We think of brown dudes like in the Middle East, right? Or brown dudes like living in Western countries. So I just think like that, like just that the words matter, and like, but I know I've taken up a lot of time and other people want to share.
That's
So I
okay.
really
There's only
appreciate
one
that.
other hand up, so that's
Oh,
why I'm going back and forth with you more.
okay. Okay.
So because I want to hear your perspective, the perspective of people who disagree with us is where we have the most to learn. So I'm just trying to understand when you say a prepackaged solution, are you saying you've seen what I proposed before in other places and you feel like it's just taken off the shelf?
I like, again, like, yeah, I'm not saying what you're like what you're specifically doing, but like the same kind of thing with like Western produced solutions or aid packages or this that, like it seems, and I could be very very wrong, and you correct me, but like it seems like it's almost the same thing but just a different packaging, right? And like
You're saying that this seems the same as the current terrorist techniques, counter-terrorist techniques?
um and I'm not going to even pretend that I know what all the terrorist, different counter-terrorist techniques are. Like, I don't like, but I think, yeah, like, okay, maybe it's confusing for me because like how, like what you're presenting, like who's going to be doing that? Is that going to be like, is that going to be a government body? Is it like who's like, maybe I'm unclear also, like who's going to be doing this work? Like, is it a
Yeah,
nonprofit?
I didn't get to that level of detail. I don't think the important part is who does it as long as someone does it. You seem to think that if a Western person does it, it's not effective, but I don't I don't necessarily want to get into whether or not it is or it isn't. But yeah, now there are more hands up, so
Okay.
I will go on to Carrie.
Wait, can I make a point about
Yeah,
this
go
if we're
ahead,
going to
Ari.
do I'll do less the 20-second
Yeah,
thing,
go
but
ahead.
I want to validate what Lenovo, sorry, I don't have her name, is saying that there seem to be some serious flaws. As to validate what you're doing, Garrett, it's like you have a man and there is a certain component of it that seems very easy to straw man. And if we want to be a good actor, that we want to make it a steel man to strengthen it, there are some real chinks in that armor that need to be addressed. And I think Lenovo isn't necessarily pointing them out in ways that I would exactly agree with, but
Well, raise your
I
hand
would
and
say,
do it, Ari.
but the point is she's definitely onto something.
Okay, raise your hand and do it then. So go ahead, Carrie.
Okay. So I don't know, just to kind of frame the comment I want to make, the way I see it is terrorism is a tactic employed by the militant wing of a political movement, right? These are people who seek to maintain or encourage some sort of political change, maintain power, something like that. It's an asymmetrical environment. Terrorism is the go-to strategy, and it has nothing to do with being brown or white. I mean, God, Sinn Féin and the IRA, they're pretty white, and they were absolutely clearly committed terrorist acts. Um, I think it ends up that what happens is terrorist groups tend to encourage government overreaction or the dominant force as a recruiting tool. And then it escalates into competing atrocities, right? Once you hit that level, it's very hard to pull out. It's kind of a downward spiral. So the question I have is if you viewed the progress of a terroristic institution or political arm, if we divide it into kind of a marketing phase or an entrenched phase, what do we actually do? Especially if it's already far advanced. And I'm thinking of examples like Afghanistan. I mean, the Taliban is super entrenched. I'm not sure, are you able to identify a on the ground strategy that could be effective at dealing with that? And the other example, obviously, would be Palestine. I don't know if we want to go in there because people get really worked up about that one. But anyway,
We
thanks.
did a whole event on the Israel-Palestine war, so we don't
Yeah.
shy away from difficult subjects here at the FTI. We hit them head on and politely. So so, just FYI, terrorism can be used not only for political power, but it can also be used to further religion or ideology as well. So that definition is malleable in all three areas. But I would say I think that what I proposed would actually still be effective in Afghanistan, even though the Taliban is very influential there. I think there are a lot of people that don't want the Taliban there. And if there were other people that were there, and I think this, to Lenovo's point, they would need to be, people that are, you know, um, like people who, in this case, I don't think like white people could be the ones that come there and do it, right? Because, they've made a very clear message that they didn't want Americans there, and so you need someone else. And so that's great. Then find someone else, and that doesn't mean that they can't be, you know, they would need to be someone that is culturally in tune with the local population and could maneuver in such a way that they can positively influence and educate people without ideally putting themselves or other people at risk. And that's a hard bill to find, but let's find those people and start trying to, make inroads, maybe at a corner of Afghanistan first and just trial it out. Like you said, Carrie, be experimental about it and try seeing if we can make inroads into some villages at the edge of Afghanistan. And if we can, then keep spreading. And I like to say, I think we all have an inherent desire to seek truth and to be fair. And if we can implant that desire in local people in a country that is, run by terrorists, and enough people have that opinion, and there's a sense that terrorists can, put down their weapons and actually be a part of society again. And there are enough people in society that would welcome them into it and say, hey, why don't you do this? It could actually happen without needing to put down their weapons other than voluntarily, like saying, look, I would rather do this. There might even be a bigger carrot by, peer pressure from locals. And so I think Lenovo has a good point. And I didn't think through as far as what she was talking about, but I think she has a good point that it should be people that are locally attuned and acclimated and culturally, understanding of the local population. So sorry, I'm going on a lot. Does that make
Oh,
sense
no,
there?
no, no, no worries. But so you, just to be clear, you envision this as being a very long-term approach, not
Yeah.
certainly not a quick fix by any means.
I don't see it as the quick fix. I think the quick fix is usually I have a saying that I tell my girls all the time, which is the what is it? The shortcuts are actually long cuts.
Woo! 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 A million followers. A million followers.
Yep, you're muted.
Sorry, one second while I report them. Um, all right. So, so what was I saying?
Maybe some other people's input.
Sure.
You're going on, Garrett, and it's
Yeah,
not a
go ahead.
two-way conversation.
Go ahead.
It's
You're next. So I guess
okay.
it's your
All
turn.
right. I agree with the. I agree very much with the lady. You have, when the term moral high ground usually denotes that somebody's coming from a place that they're above other people. That's the usual context. So maybe you didn't realize that when you're using it, but
It's
that's
not that
the.
I didn't realize that I'm saying that we should
No,
have
no.
higher.
If you, I'm talking.
Oh,
You
I'm
know,
sorry.
you're
I thought
doing
you
that
wanted.
too.
Go
You're
ahead.
monopolizing. You're shoving things down our throats. And I'm not being nasty or anything. I'm from New York, and we use the less words as possible to be very clear and direct. And there's,
Well, we're in
maybe
the
it seems like
FTI,
at
and so
the
I'm going to ask you to
expense.
remain polite, even though
Yeah,
you're
okay.
from New York.
Okay. I'll try to keep your interpretation of polite. But what
Please
she
do.
was saying was, you have all these neatly wrapped. Uh, it's not even attached to the reality. You're saying install government. Americans from the Indians, what they said about the white man was he speaks with a forked tongue. In other words, he says one thing and this is going way back. We have not done any, and you're saying doing good, going to these places and somebody helps somebody with their leg. You're doing a confirmation bias to the highest degree because you're stating a case and then you bring. By the way, the Taliban, they weren't upset because we weren't paying them. They got plenty of money. Osama bin Laden is attached to the royal family. The only people who were allowed to leave in the air after 9/11 was his family. His family was here, and they were the only ones allowed to fly
Try
after
to stick to one
9/11.
topic per time you raise your hand, if you could.
Excuse me?
If you could, I asked you in the beginning, I asked
Well,
everybody to,
you talk so much. What maybe you might want to do next time is talk. Make something, and then people could interact because you have so much there, and it's just it's not tied to the reality of what's actually going on. We made these people upset, and now we're going to go to them and try to come to them with compassion. The trick is not to do things to set people off in the first place, where you antagonize them and put them in a corner, and then now they're coming at you, is to prevent this. You're thinking and you're talking like the American. We're gonna fix the world. Well, look what's happening in our own country. We can't even fix ourselves. But you got all these neatly wrapped formulas that they're so far from reality, actually in actualization, practical use, that it's way off track, way off track
thank
for
you.
actually
Garrett, may
fixing
I react to
the.
what iPhone is saying, please? May I
Yeah, go
react?
ahead.
iPhone, Garrett said at the very beginning of the meeting that he's doing a presentation. And generally speaking, this meeting presentation usually takes half an hour to 45 minutes. And it's his group, it's his meeting. So please give him the prerogative to host the
It's not
meeting.
always me
Thank
that
you.
presents, by the way. There are other people that present. If you didn't like my presentation, you might like other people's as
No,
well. But
you're not.
I think we actually agree a lot more than you think, because I didn't disagree with anything you said other than the rude things. I agree with you that we should not make people upset. And I talked about examples where we do all kinds of horrible things. And I agree with everything you said. I think we need to stop doing things that make people upset. And that was what my whole presentation was about. So I think it's very interesting that you say you disagree with my presentation, but all your critiques
No,
are the same critiques that I gave in the presentation that I was agreeing with you. So I agree with everything you just said, other than the rude stuff. I agree with everything else.
well, I was just mentioning one of the main characteristics of this country is we installing governments, and you mentioned that we're
Yep,
going to come and you brush through it so quickly, and it was almost like a flim flam in a way because you brushed through and it was like an idealistic, and it's not what's actually going on, Garrett. This is not. We already created this. We've been doing this for a long time. We've installed governments that have terrorized their people. The
yeah,
Shah of Iran, Idi Amin, all these. I mean, it's too many to count.
I
Long as
agree.
we they
If you
said
want to
our
get a
greed,
if you want to
we
get a full
kept them
list,
there.
if you want to get a
And
full list, just read Noam Chomsky's book. He's got a full list. I've read several of them, three or four, and I'll tell you, it's enough to make you sick about all the horrible things America has done abroad. But one thing I will tell you that I think you were wrong about is that the Taliban didn't get upset because we stopped paying them money. If you look at the historical facts about why the Taliban started to attack America when they used to be on our payroll, it was because we stopped paying them.
no,
And
no, we
if you
wanted to
can hold
run
on,
them.
hold on. Now it's my turn to talk. So
Go
if you
ahead.
can provide a source that is a verifiable, objective source that says otherwise, please put it in the chat and I would love to read it.
Okay, well, in all of the Middle East problems, what we did, we went over there, and then we brought AT&T. We brought all the big companies. We say we want to help somebody, but that's the way in. And then once we're in, we want to take over, and they don't want our culture. They don't want your kindness. They want to be left to their culture. America is 200 years old, maybe
Did
a
you
little
hear
more now.
me? Did you
These
hear me?
people,
Did
yeah.
you hear me say that I wanted to install American culture in foreign countries?
Yeah, well, when you say
Simply, people
install
should be going back
democracy,
to Earth.
installing anything, these people have been around 10 times longer than we have. More than
Yeah.
that, these people have a culture. America is cultureless. We have no culture. It's a hodgepodge of everything. These people, we're going to go to their country and we're going to tell them what civilization is and look at our country. Is this a good definition of democracy or is this an oligarchy? International, but these are the same people that are doing all of these things. When Bush first got into office, he had a party in the Rose Garden. He invited the war machine, and this was the first war in Iraq there that was privatized.
So now I
Privatized
think we should give
war.
someone else a chance. I appreciate your
Okay,
comment.
all right.
I
Well, you
agree
get your
with
facts. Your facts are not right, and it's just a little
well,
difficult. Go
if
ahead.
my facts are not right and they agree with you, then that means you're wrong. Because I agreed with everything you said, and all my facts agree with everything you said. So I don't know what to
You're
tell
not
you.
gonna find a better talker than me. You're just trying to pacify. You don't. It's not you agree or disagree. I'm
I'm
just
not trying to
calling you
pacify.
out
I
on your
agreed with everything
facts.
you said. I said
Not,
several
I'm
of
not
those.
looking to argue with you.
I think you
I'm
are. It's okay.
no, that's what you're making it. I'm
It's
trying to say
okay.
the premises that you put
I'm
forth
agreeing with you,
and the
even though you
things
want to
that
argue with me. It's okay. Let's
you
let the
brought
next
in.
person go. Mark, we have four hands up, so let's let the next
All
person go.
right. Let,
Thank you for your comments. I appreciate them, and I agree with everything you said, other than the ones that I pointed out. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. I think this is a really good conversation, and we're getting a lot of viewpoints. I appreciate your presentation. One thing that I totally agree with kind of the premise, and it also reminds me of something I heard actually Elon Musk say like early on into this latest, I guess, Israeli-Palestinian issue from October 7th. And some guy was interviewing him and they was saying like, hey, how should Israel approach this issue, right? And I'm no fan of Elon Musk, but he said something that really made me say like, yeah, that's it. Like, and his response was Israel, if they were serious about kind of their security, the security of the region, and just living in harmony with the Palestinian people, they would actually be doing the opposite. It'd be conspicuous acts of kindness. and they'd approach the situation with compassion. And through that, and of course, to a lot of people's points in the call, like that's not something that's going to happen overnight. And typically, that's something you would like to see some restitution in the beginning, some justice, some restitution, some accountability, right? Some admitting that, hey, we did things that were wrong, but we also have been in this situation for such a long time. How do we move forward? And it's not using the sword, it's using compassion, right? So I totally agree with that premise. And I guess it just goes to show that the whole world is kind of inside out, really. But I also agree with a lot of what Lenovo was saying in terms of kind of the language that we use and how we deploy things, right? And how we label certain people. And even like she was saying about the moral high ground, using that phrase kind of implies that the other side is less than, right? Or like, I know that one of the speakers had said that like, hey, being labeled a terrorist isn't related to race. And that's true, like factually, right? Like they've been quote unquote terrorists of all races, right? But at least how the word's deployed in our media, right? We automatically think of someone of a certain race, of a certain religion, of a certain region, right? And I guess being really, really tight and getting really, really fair and bringing some equity to kind of language, I think is a big step in kind of, I guess, solving a lot of these issues, or at least a step in the right direction.
Yeah. No, and I agree, and I think we need to be thoughtful about the approach, and by saying moral high ground, I wasn't saying that we as Westerners have a moral high ground over people somewhere other than the West. That's not what I was saying. I was saying that people who believe in peace, love, and compassion have a moral high ground over people who think that killing people to drive fear into their hearts have a moral high ground. And we have often been on the wrong side of that equation. And what I'm saying is we should be on the right side of that equation, which is the moral high ground, which is the one of love and compassion rather than one of let's make people afraid of us. What we're doing with our current counterterrorism methods is trying to make the terrorists afraid of us, which is a little ironic considering that they're trying to make us afraid of them. And then we're trying to say, no, we're bigger, badder, and scarier. Whereas I'm saying, let's lead with love and compassion and education, and rather than try to be the scarier monster.
Yeah, can I just respond really quickly to that? I don't
Yeah,
want
of
to take
course.
too much time. When I'm talking about the moral high ground, I totally get from your perspective that like, hey, it's like this idea of like love versus kind of violence, right? And I agree with you, but I'm not so much talking about you, and I don't even know if Lenovo was so much talking about you, but I think that when I've heard it in the media and mainstream media, it has been an era of supremacy, superiority, right? It's kind of like if you're, somewhat into politics, a lot of times you'll hear like, hey, coastal elites, like Democrats, they think they're smarter than everyone, right?
I
And
see.
even if you think you are smarter than someone or kinder or better, right? No one really wants to hear that you think that way,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
So
that
I
was
think that's what
not
it
that was
is.
not at all my intent, and I apologize, but I don't watch the news, so I don't know what mainstream media says.
It's
I
not. It's not. It's. I'm not. I'm not going at you. I'm just talking generally because
yeah,
I totally get what you're
no,
saying.
I don't watch the news at all because I just think that they sensationalize everything and they just want eyeballs and they want to make everything look like hell, the world's coming to hell in a handbasket every day, and they want to keep us glued to the TV to look at how horrible and bad the world is. And that's not where my head is at. My head is at trying to make it a better place. So I don't I don't I'm sorry that I missed the reference about moral high ground and that I misused the term. If it was meant something other than what I meant to say, I did give like 30 ways of like what I meant by moral high ground, and I'm sorry if people don't like that term. I didn't mean it in the way that you guys are describing it, so I apologize for that. Mea culpa, mea culpa. Dave, go ahead.
Thanks, Garrett. Enjoy your sessions as always. I believe you mentioned September 11th a couple of times,
Yep.
and I'd like to give my two bits about that because everybody talks about, oh, they came over to kill Americans. And yes, a lot of Americans were killed, also Muslims and a lot of other innocent people when those towers collapsed. But it's my theory that the key word is jealousy, that we have good Muslims over there and say we're following the prophet and we're living a good holy life or whatever, and how come the evil empire they have the tallest building and not us, and we need to destroy that, to get even or whatever. Most of folks my age remember, I think in the early 90s, 92, 93, something like under the Blind Sheikh, I think his name was. They directed a track attack on one of the Twin Towers and put explosives around one of the concrete columns supporting the building with the idea the building would fall over and actually fall over like dominoes and one knocked down the other, I think, or something like that. And luckily it did not happen. We were able to patch the foundation, and a lot, I would say a lot of people don't even know about that or forgot about it. But the thing is, they're cognizant of American society. If they just want to kill Americans, the Super Bowl has a lot more people. Of course, it'd be tough for a plane to come into, Times Square on New Year's Eve, but that's a pretty huge crowd. But yeah, to me, it's jealousy back and forth about what America has and what we don't have, and we're good people. How come we don't have that? And I'm very sad that we're taking this approach now with this administration that we're just America, we're the best in the whole world. We're not going to help anybody. Everybody in these S blank whole countries, they can just go take a walk, and we're not going to give any foreign aid to anybody because that's our money. It's not your money. I really hope we get back. Well, and I was just thinking of the Peace Corps. We didn't build any buildings with
Right.
it. It was an example that we care about you, and we were sending our young people over to third world countries to help them develop. So anyway, my two best worth. Thank you, Garrett.
Out of curiosity, Dave, what makes you think that the 9/11 terrorists were trying to attack America out of jealousy?
Oh, the other thing I would say about that, my recollection was Osama bin Laden and all these other good Muslims were upset because we had troops over there for the first Gulf War. And among our troops were actually women, and having a woman being over men, of course, it's to our basic evangelical Christians, they hate that also. But we had women driving, and that was forbidden in their countries, and we were disrespecting them and having the evil empire in their holy country. I think that was part of the resentment. But like I said, just jealousy that they were led good lives, but they didn't have what we had. That's what I meant by jealousy.
Interesting. I would just do me a favor, Dave. Try to look for an objective source that can corroborate that view, because I haven't heard that one before. The explanation I gave is the only one that I found in my research on the topic. So, and I did a lot of deep searching after 9/11. It was a traumatic experience. So I wanted to know, why the heck did these people come after us so hard? And I didn't hear anything about jealousy come out of that
Yeah,
research. So,
that's pretty much my theory. But I'll look around,
okay.
Garrett, maybe between now and next meeting
Yeah,
I can do, and maybe find another source. Thank you.
cool. No problem. Ginny, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. Was it
Yeah.
also our support of the Jewish state that
What's
they
that?
also was it also our support of the Jewish state is the reason?
I didn't see anything about that. It was all about the fact that we were basically like employing them in Afghanistan to be
Yeah,
our Russian killers, and then we just dropped, once they gave us what we wanted, which was a huge loss for Russia, we just said, you know what, we're done with you and we're leaving you alone. And they were like, wait, you can't just stop. Like, you can't just cut us off. And we didn't reincorporate them back into society, and there were people in our government that said we should reincorporate these people back into society. We should do the right thing, which apparently I can't say do what's the moral high ground because that's makes me persona non grata, but we should be kind to these people, and we should help them reincorporate back into society and be normal human beings after we turn them into cold-blooded killers, or we paid them for being cold-blooded killers. And the powers that be decided, no, we're not going to do that. And as the guy that said he disagreed with me on everything, but I thought I agreed with him on most things, said, like, that essentially, 9/11 was essentially our fault for not being better about the way that we handled the end of the Afghanistan, Russia, US proxy war. And people don't like to hear that, right? Because no one likes to hear that 9/11 was actually, there are a lot of conspiracy theories that say Bush implanted 9/11. I think that's BS. But like, I do think it was our fault if you go down to the root cause of it, because I'm a very root cause analysis kind of guy, and I think it comes back to Afghanistan. So
Just a 20-second thing.
sure.
If we just left after we did what we did not leave. They wanted us to leave them alone and have their own culture. We stayed, and then we went to war with them. And they fought us with the very weapons that we gave them to fight we made a mess of it, but if we had just left, they don't want our culture. They don't want these things. They have their own. If we would have just left, we wouldn't have been caught in another Vietnam that we lost.
I'm gonna fact check that one because I haven't heard that before. Ginny, go ahead.
Um, First of all, I have no problem with your use of moral high ground because I know who you are, Garrett,
That's
right?
true, but not everybody does, Ginny. And so
Exactly. I guess
they're
that's
all
part
coming
of the
from a place
problem.
of, and
Not
look,
every, yeah,
they don't have bad intentions. They're educating me, right?
yeah, yeah.
I'm trying to
Okay,
learn too.
okay. Just
So
wanted to make
yeah,
that
yeah,
clear.
no, and I
Okay.
appreciate it, Ginny.
Yeah, and
So
another thing that I
yeah,
wanted to say, and I hope, you'll take it as uh, partially my humor. People, we have historically tried to eradicate mosquito-borne disease. What is it? Um,
Malaria.
Malaria by spraying and killing mosquitoes. We have tried to eradicate other, like using DDT in 1950s, blah, 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 to get rid of, what was it? DDT. So I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of wild idea. So scientists have developed, have come a long way. Medical science has come a very long way. So I'm thinking we need to have these scientists come up with spray that can spray discontented people of the world. Go and just come up and just go and spray, and it would be known as happy spray. So that's my okay. It's not funny. All right,
I'm sorry,
everybody.
Ginny. I was fact checking what the last person said, so I probably would have laughed if I were paying more attention. I apologize.
Well, my next career that I'm pursuing is comedy. So anyway, thank you for humoring me. All right.
Yeah, of course. It's always good to have you, Jenny. Thank you.
Mhm.
Um, so Carrie, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So, I think part of the problem I'm seeing here in some of the commentary is I'm hearing a lot of people say, well, we think this, they think that, these folks do this thing, those folks do this other thing. And that is exactly the kind of generalized stereotypes that these people are complaining about, right? History is a fictional summary of millions of individual motivations and actions. You can't say, oh, the US did this for this reason, right? Who's the US? I'm a part of that, right? I don't necessarily think that all terrorists are brown people or follow Islam or whatnot. So where do I fit in? Or do I not? Right? I didn't make any of these decisions.
But it's the history according to who? Whose history?
Precisely. There is no
Yeah.
one single history. Hell, we can't even agree on what happened in among the family at Thanksgiving, at least at my house. You start asking people about who did what where, and it's a food fight,
Right.
right? Now you start to get a whole country and all these independent things. It's a big giant mess, but it's impossible for us to work with those concepts. But so I think we need to kind of take a step back from attributing all people here believe this one thing. It's like an
Yeah,
extension.
I like this brings up one of my sayings, Carrie, which is the only generalization that's generally safe to make is that generalizations are generally unsafe to make.
I love it.
So, I agree with you 100%, Carrie, other than I would pick a nit, which is I do think there was one objective reality, and that if you read enough versions of history, you can piece together the most probabilistically likely one that happened. And I'll give an example of where I don't take the postmodernist approach. Um,
Hmm.
my grandfather was at D-Day and, saw concentration camps. I have met people who said, World War II didn't have concentration camps. That's all made up. I'm sorry, but it wasn't made up. This was very real. And this is a real part of history, and it's important that we acknowledge that it's real. Because, when you start to forget history, like you repeat those mistakes, and that's not one that we want to see repeated anytime in the future, let alone anytime soon.
Yeah.
So, I do get that there are many perspectives, but I think it's important, and part of what we do in the FTI is listen to those many perspectives and agree with the ones that are right, which you've been hearing me like agree with people who said they disagree with me that I didn't disagree with at all. So, it's okay to have different perspectives, and it's important that we agree with the ones that resonate the most as true. So even though there may be digression about what is reality, we have to do our best to understand reality to make the best decisions we can, understanding the past so that we can chart a good course for the future. Does that make
I,
sense?
yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And I think that gets to the heart of like the differences between facts and opinions,
Right.
which is really blurred in our media these days.
Yes, I agree 100%. And I did fact check the key motivators for the 9/11 folks. According to Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda statements, the U.S. military presence in the Middle East, support for Israel, sanctions and bombings in Iraq, and retaliation for the U.S. military actions against Al Qaeda, where we launched missile attacks against Al Qaeda training camps after the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania were bombed. There was no motivation because of the U.S. presence in Afghanistan, because the U.S. wasn't even in Afghanistan when 9/11 happened. So that was not, but you were right that they were there after. And I learned something new from fact checking that is that the U.S. did remain after the Soviet-Afghan war, and they did remain there for a while, but we did pull out. So by 9/11, we were completely out of Afghanistan. So it was other things that motivated them then. That said, Mandy, go ahead.
In your presentation, was this for the whole world, or was it
We'll
just
put it
for?
up on YouTube. If you can get the whole world to
No,
watch,
no,
Mandy, I'll give you
no.
$100. I'll give you 1,000.
Because I always have to bring everything back in. I say wind my neck in. I have to wind my neck in and see what I can do in my real life. And when I think about North America, many people I know from other parts of the world are not interested in what American or the British or the European have to say. They're very upset, and I don't think we will ever know what we've created too much terror. And I think that we really need to look at what's happening here in America, in Canada, because I don't think that it's going to get any better. Like for me, coming from England, homegrown terrorism is huge. And we are creating the environment here to make it bigger. I think this should be our first thing to do, is to work on what's going on in here. Because we're getting to the point where they're not interested in what Europe has to say, what America has to say. Does this make any sense?
I hear what you're saying.
I had a
I hear
bunch of
what you're
stuff to
saying.
say, because the ideas that you had, yeah, great. But again, many of the people I know, they'll just roll their eyes. Oh, here they go again. Right, here they go again. Meanwhile, not acknowledging, for example, in India, 47, I think, trillion dollars were taken due to colonization. Well, some Indians want that money back, don't they? So many people based on their culture or thoughts or ideas about the world, will not be satisfied until they get what they want. I think it's going to be back to that other one that you're going to be doing about jealousy.
Well, the next one was going to be about
Revenge, sorry.
revenge, but
Yeah.
jealousy is a good topic too.
Yeah. But the revenge of it all.
I think jealousy is a good one too. I'm going to add that. Thank you, Mandy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because here, it's happening here. I know from coming from the lower classes, we will fight for our religions and this and that in this country. In these countries, we will start those kinds of wars and terrors in these countries. Because I don't know how we do it, but we create monocultures within these countries.
When you say we create monocultures in these countries, what do you mean by that?
Like, we'll have our areas.
What's that?
We'll have our areas. Like in England, we have our areas with majority Muslims. We'll have our areas with majority. Right. And we are not, we will run on our own laws, right? Anything happens within our own community, we're not going to be telling the police. Like in the lower classes, there's a lot of stuff that happens there. And you'll never know what's actually happening. And the terror is building and building and building in there. And I think that going to other countries, I think we missed the boat on that. We need to work on what's going to be happening here.
Yeah, I don't think that it's mutually exclusive, right? You know, the we is a big we. And as Carrie pointed out, we is 300 million people in America alone, which is 330 million, which is a pretty large group. So a couple of us could work on at home and a couple of us could work on abroad, and we could work with a couple of people abroad, and we could work on a couple of people abroad with at home, and we can get all combinations of things put together.
They don't want Americans and Europe.
Well, that was very clear. I was pretty much woman-splained that as a white man, I'm not allowed to have an opinion about this topic, but I still think I can have an opinion about this topic anyway. So, and it's okay. Men mansplain, I can get woman-splained. So, but like, and I don't think she meant it that way, and she even clarified in the comments. I hope you don't mind my joking. And I don't know if I know your name, Lenovo. But like, I think that the importance of
here, if we have those monocultures, it's right there where there's a lot of in any of those cultures and any of our cultures. When we get together, we're going to be up to no good. I think men need work. If every man was working, then we wouldn't have this problem.
I don't think it's quite so simple. I do think that we need to work on our problems at home, but I think we can work on problems at home and abroad. And I don't think just because someone is Western, they can't add any value to a non-Western country in any way, shape, or form, whether through knowledge or wisdom. I think we can share wisdom with each other no matter where we're from and no matter where we're communicating with someone to. Wisdom is wisdom. And if it's wisdom for you, great. If it's not wisdom for you, cool, ignore me. I'm still going to try to share wisdom with you, whether you're Eastern, you're Western, Southern, Northern, I don't care what pole you're on. I'm going to try to share wisdom with you. And if you don't like it, cool, then just ignore it. And I think if more people did that and followed what we call the 5 intentions, which is to be our best self, seek truth and be fair, transparently share our beliefs with others and listen to them with an open mind, hone our critical thinking skills so we can better discern fact from fiction and wisdom from folly, and use all that to increase happiness and decrease harm in the world after preventing significant unnecessary harm, full stop, from happening to any human being on earth, I think we would all be better. Whether we're white, brown, red, yellow, doesn't matter. We would all be better off. And I will share those things because I think they benefit everyone. And I think tonight's presentation matters just as much to, white terrorists as it does to brown terrorists, as it does to terrorists who are any other color. It doesn't matter. Right? We talked about how actually Southeast Asia is the biggest bed for terrorism right now. So it wasn't about brown people, right? It's about Asians, right? And it's not even about Asians because you know what? We have a lot of domestic terror in the US. And so to Mandy's point, we need to deal with that. But my solution for that was to get mental health help for everybody in the US so that they can get counseling before they start to get to the point where they decide they want to shoot up their friends at school. Or that they want to shoot up school children. So
yeah, so that's terror. That's terror right there. When we first said about when you said you were doing this on terrorism, the first thing that came to me was Kraft and Nestle, because for me, they're terror because of what they've done to the foods.
Right.
So terror could be anything.
Well, and
Okay.
I was using the definition of terrorism from the dictionary, which Kerry described pretty adequately, except
Yeah.
he just talked about it for political, and I just added that for religion and ideology are reasons that people are terrorists too, and he was cool with that, which I appreciate, Kerry. And so thank you, Mandy. I appreciate your comments. And iPhone.
Garrett,
Yeah, go ahead.
this is
Yeah, go ahead,
Jenny.
Jenny.
I'm trying to come in with another device if you don't mind. Is it okay?
Oh, is it? It should let you in.
Oh, I've been
There's no
waiting.
there's no block. Unless,
Um,
oh, you know what? It's possible that I thought it was a note taker. Does it say note taker on it?
it says networking. Are you priya kudaja? Anu priya kudaja? It says networking. Anu priya kudaja. Is that?
You're probably going to the wrong
No, I'm using the link that you gave me, and you said, Ginny, use this link. And well, I'm going to try one more time.
yeah. Let me
Did you say iPhone?
No, it's a Sam. It's
No,
a.
I'm asking him, did he say was he falling on me? While you
Yeah,
straighten that
yeah,
out,
you're
Jenny.
next. Yeah, you're next. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Wow, it's pretty stirring, but all right, let's just go with one thing. When we say something and then it denotes something to other people, I've come to realize that I figure out what I'm saying and what I'm doing by how it affects others. It's not only in my mind what I'm doing, is I need to check in with people so that I can get a reflection of it. Or else I'm just, standing on some high ground. But what look at where we are right now, okay? It costs over $125,000 to keep somebody on Rikers Island. And that's a hell pit of nobody's going to come out of there a better human being, right? But they will only pay $7,000 for a kid to go to school. We're running, when we go to these countries, we're saying they don't want to hear from us. Is everything, Rockefeller himself, way back when the public schools were founded, and they said, oh, you want to educate? He said, I don't want to educate people to do anything. I want to educate workers. What we're being run by money. And that's the whole thing. That's it in a nutshell. So until we straighten that out, this capitalistic place that we're in, and it's all about money. It's all about money. So when we straighten that out, so we want to go someplace else and help them. You're saying we could be here, we could be there, we could be everywhere. Like this fella who just, he says history it doesn't exist. It is history is a reality. It is a reality. It's recorded what happened. And until we could build on that, and we're just dispensing it, and you guys creating an air of ambiguity. And unless we're clear about what we're talking about and straightforward.
Seems to be dealing with the same kind of surrealist.
Ginny, you
Excuse
weren't
me?
on mute. Ginny, you weren't on mute, so I muted you. Go ahead. Just try to finish up your thought.
No, it seems like somebody else is.
No, she was not on.
I heard what she said. It's okay. The strange thing, I'll just say this one thing. When somebody goes against the grain within a group, the pack, right, and brings in other ideas, it's just like when I go to a restaurant, I say this food is terrible. They said nobody else said anything. A lot of people won't say something. But what's happening now with the media and propaganda, and you guys right now, I can see the ambiguities, is look where it got us. Look where it got us. We're in a world where we got an idiot talking about taking over Green. He's poking things at Canada, and you know who's going to pay for that? We are. But more than half the country voted for this lunatic.
Please,
Why?
please,
Because he
please,
speaks
please,
for them.
please, I need to encourage you again. Our one rule is to be polite. You can say
Well,
anything
I'm being
you want.
polite.
That is not polite. If I
Okay, let me
called
say
you
it
those
this
names,
way.
would you feel like it was polite?
No, yeah. Yeah,
It's more
no, okay,
polite
let's
than
say this
it's more polite
No,
sociopath.
than
we
talking.
both know that you wouldn't. Please, just
Okay, all right, well,
I'm
let's
not
say,
disagreeing with any of your sentiment because I've said a
okay, all
lot of
right,
stuff
I'll
against.
take that back. I'll
I said a
retract
lot of
that.
stuff against this man very publicly, and I'm
Okay, well,
hoping
wait a minute,
you
wait a minute. Let's
go
just
ahead.
say, would it be accurate to say convicted felon?
That's
Convicted.
accurate.
Okay, well, this is the note. We got him back in there. First thing he's going to poke at the two main partners right on our continent, Canada and Mexico. Billions and billions of dollars, millions and millions of people are eating. That is all coming under threat now. I mean, this is what's going on, and you can always tell who voted for him because of their ambiguity. We got to make a stand. What's going on? We're heading downhill fast,
Part
and
of
we're not able to eat. In another 6 8 months, if something doesn't change, we're going to be in bigger trouble. So we can't be ambiguous about this. And people around the world are hip to America's games. And you say we, and there's 3 million of us or 3 billion of us. That's more than half of us got an ex-felon who's a misogynist, talk terrible, all those things. It's okay. Just like America, when we go to other countries, it's okay what they do to their people as long as they're a good old boy with us. And that's what happened in Iran. They got rid of the Shah, and they
please
were
try to finish your thought.
yeah, okay, they were against us because we propped him up. We were the problem over there. So
Right.
we need to stick our nose in our business and straighten out our own backyard. And maybe we got enough work there where we don't need to be philanthropically installing governments in other countries.
Yeah. So I agree with you, except I would say that we should be doing good in the world in general rather than doing harm in the world. Whether we like it or not, as the wealthiest country in the world, people look to us for positive influence, and we have often failed that high expectation that people have for us, as you've rightly pointed out. And as if anyone is not familiar with that history, just read a couple books by Noam Chomsky, but read it like not before bedtime because it's very, very dark
No,
stuff.
he's a great guy.
He's a
But
great author,
guess
but
who
his
owns
writing is
us?
very dark.
Yeah, but who owns us? China and Japan got trillions and trillions. If they call in their debt, we owe these two countries.
Right.
I mean, our tax dollars are paying interest. And then the money that's left over, we're sending it to the Ukraine. Sir, what I'm trying to tell you is you can't do both effectively. And right now, we don't have the resources because we're deeply in debt. We need
We
to we need to concentrate on home, where the heart is, here, and then make an
Please,
example.
please, you've made your point. Thank you for your
Okay.
comments. Um, and it's interesting. I would encourage everybody, if I can just take a quick moment. Projection is when we take our own challenges and like inner turmoil, and we project it onto other people. I want to just take a quick like an aside and just say, everybody, watch for it. Watch for it in yourself, watch for it in other people, and you will learn so much how the negativity you receive is very often a projection of someone else's inner negativity. And I'm just mentioning that as an aside because I love to share knowledge and wisdom. No particular person in mind. I just want to share that. And I really do appreciate your comments. And that said, I want to let Lenovo go next.
Thanks. Actually, I this is a comment to Carrie way back. Carrie, sorry, way back. I appreciate his comments, and I just want to clarify because I wasn't sure if they were somewhat directed at me. I totally appreciate that. That when I say the U.S., I'm talking about the U.S. government, not the people.
Thank
I
you
just
for
want to make that
clarifying
clear.
that, by the way. That's an
And then,
important distinction to make.
yeah, and you know what? Because I was trying to rush into all the things I wanted to say because I know there's a lot of people here, and I didn't. I'm better with my writing than with my speaking. But the other comment I just wanted to also make was regarding what Mandy was saying. So I don't think it's jealousy. I really do think And instead of jealousy, Garrett, maybe a session on injustice. I really think that there's a lot of injustice that hasn't been acknowledged. And I think that's what feeds a lot of revenge and hate and trauma and like some of the stuff that you're, because I sense that you have a kind of a spiritual take on things based on what you're saying. You talk about compassion and projection, and I really think that at the heart of this, because we're all human, and I think there's good in all of us, and I think that there's a lot of hurt, and it's so like negativity feeds negativity, and I think that it breeds like hate and like all this polarization. I think that's, and just using that language, they do this, it's a very binary. And I think at the heart of it, people feel hurt. It's not that they're jealous. I think that like like I'm only going to speak for myself. I'm not speaking for anybody else, but I feel like voices like mine had traditionally not been heard, right? And and I think that there is like a backlash, and I know you have a session on DEI or whatever, DEI next week, which I'm looking forward to. But I think that there's a bunch of different things like conflated where it's not like people don't want to hear, but like I think we don't know how to talk to each other. We don't know how to listen. And I think there at the heart of it is a lot of communication. And it's even just, for example, it's just some of the stuff that I've said. It's kind of not how I intended to say it. And it's just because how we process language and how we use language. And I just wanted to make that, I just put that out there. But thank you very much for the opportunity.
No problem. And if you want to speak about something, feel free to reach out to me. I don't know if you got my email, but I'll put it in the chat again.
Okay.
Because you said voices like yours often aren't heard. And if you have something that you want to share so that your voice is heard, we like to have guest presenters, so feel free to reach out to me. And if you want to discuss something to present, feel free.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm going to brace myself if you come next week, because you're going to hear a white man talking about DEI. So bear
It's
with
not
me.
what my perspective is probably going to be very different than what you think it's going to be.
Okay.
So I'm actually writing an article on it. So, but it's probably not what you think it's going to be. So I am looking forward to, because I do think, yes, your voice as a white man does matter in this conversation. And I think that some of the wokeism stuff is like way out of hand, but I'll save that for next week.
Okay. We'll talk about it next week. So let me get back to my notes.
First, it could. I know it makes some.
Jeff, you were off mute, so I just muted you. I don't think you meant to be off mute, but if you did, feel free to unmute. Yeah, I want to agree with your negativity breeds negativity and hate and polarization. That's part of why I actually came up with the strategy that I presented tonight, is because I think, fighting killers by killing them is not necessarily the right approach, right? It just breeds more hate and anger and resentment. And I think, fighting with love and compassion is a more appropriate response. Now, that doesn't mean we never pick up a gun, right? If someone attacks us, we defend ourselves. But if we're defensive only and we say, look, we're going to defend and we're going to support the cultures, the society that is on the ground in a way that they feel is supportive to them. And I agree with you. I don't know your name, Lenovo, but I'll just call you Lenovo. I agree with you that it should be in a way that is, and I follow what I call the modified platinum rule. And so it should be in a way that, and I'll explain what the platinum rule is. It's to treat other people the way they want to be treated. And in order to do that, you have to first understand how someone wants to be treated, which means getting to know them well, which is part of what we do as members of the FTI, is we get to know each other or get to know each other well, and then we treat each other the way we want to be treated, which is by being surrounded by people who want to be our best selves, to seek truth, and to be fair. So, if we are going to, and I give this as a we as in an expansive we. When I say we, I mean humanity, not we as in Western powers. I mean humanity. If we as humanity want to combat terrorism, which I think most of the free world does want to combat terrorism, my hypothesis here is for all countries, and it was in the chat, but I want to mention again, Oh, by the way, I should put the link for next week's chat for DEI, for diversity, equity, and inclusion, in the chat. And so if people want to join next week, I put a link to the chat on diversity, equity, inclusion. And so ultimately, I think we should, yeah, basically, there's a good parable of a good Cherokee parable of Native American grandfather is talking to his grandson and says, "Inside me there are two wolves. One is angry and mean and hateful, and the other is kind and loving and compassionate, and they're always fighting with each other." And the grandson says, "Well, Grandpa, who wins?" And he goes, the one you feed the most." Right? And so that's to your point about what do we feed in our heads? Do we feed positivity? Do we feed negativity? Are we beating ourselves up all the time, or are we trying to do our best and accept the rest? Which is what I like to say is don't stress, just do your best and accept the rest. So if we're doing our best, we can't expect more of ourselves. So there's no point in beating ourselves up anymore. So that said, thank you for yeah, the parable is great. It's a Cherokee parable, I believe. You can like if you Google it, it'll come right up. So Carrie, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make a comment that regarding certainty and ambiguity. I think recognizing that we don't have access to perfect information is a part of humility, right? Promoting absolute ideological or moral certainty is part of how we got into this problem in the first place. So I would argue absolutely against promoting any kind of certainty because you need the kind of flexibility that I think you've been trying to demonstrate here, which is like, hey, we have a disagreement. Let's find out where those disagreements are. Maybe my information isn't good. Maybe there's a different perspective, et cetera, et cetera. That's part of having a conversation rather than a shouting match.
It's part of having a productive conversation, which is why for the people that disagreed with me or said they disagree with me, I asked clarifying questions, right? Because I was like, wow, it sounded like you agreed with me, so I wanted to ask what parts they disagreed with to better understand them. And the more I asked, the more I said, gosh, I really think we agree, actually. I know you said you disagree with me, but I think we actually mostly agree, except for maybe a few nits that I picked. But we can all pick nits, right? But they're not the important part. The spirit of things is what's important. So, and that's the difference between Confucianist versus legalist philosophy, which I learned when I audited a class that I wish I had taken in school. Confucianists strive for a goal. And so the first intention of the Freethinker Institute is Confucianist. It's to be the best version of ourselves, to seek truth and to be fair. You're never going to be perfectly fair or find absolute truth or be the absolute best version of yourself that could ever exist. It's just aspirational. You strive for it. And then the legalist perspective is I'm going to write down a law and everybody's got to follow the letter of the law. And there's always loopholes that you can find. As someone pointed out, our current president has found many loopholes in many laws. In fact, his golf courses are taxed as farms because he will occasionally put goats down to eat the brambles, and so he taxes it as a farm. So yes, interesting how many loopholes there are, and so yeah, thank you, Carrie and Mandy.
I was going to add to what Lenova. I know it's not Lenova, is not her name, but it is
Okay.
now. But
She hasn't given us another one, so we'll use that.
yeah, it reminded me of how it is difficult, even for me. This is not my, you all are not my people, in the sense that the language I usually use, when you don't have, when you're speaking English, there's different levels of English and education. Right there, that already creates some distrust for people. And it already creates animosity. So you can't really, trying to bring people together when we're showing a superiority in the way that we speak English is also problematic. I think what we can do, like even in our own neighborhoods, can we go to different neighborhoods which aren't our own? Can we start befriending people? Like if we can take it down to that level, then we can make a bit of an impact right there. But are we really interested in doing that? I think we can always talk about them over there, but we got to get in there. And this would be one way to get in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's such a big thing. English for me, yeah, superiority. If somebody can string a few words together, or they're speaking the Queen's English or the King's English, then straight away, I'm not interested in talking to you. And being here, it's so intimidating for me because when I'm nervous, I'm going to go back to my common English. And in my common English, every third word is a swear word. So how am I trying to be polite? I'm trying to be really polite. Otherwise, you're going to kick me off. But I feel called by, I don't know, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph to be here and to
Thank
talk
you.
about how it is in the lower classes
You
because it's us
were.
against you.
I heard all three of them calling you, by the way.
So when I think of the terror of how you all are making me feel, I think this is exactly how people feel.
I'm not
When,
trying to make you feel that way,
not
Mandy,
at
but
all.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
you don't have to. I can create the whole Bollywood story in my own
Yeah.
head,
But I will
right?
say, Mandy, I also grew up swearing a lot. I also grew up very poor, and I had to learn that that's not polite speech. And
Yeah.
I met a guy that I was like in discourse with, in like I used to do a lot of philosophy chat, and when I had more time, and this guy would just swear, he would be rude to people, and I just wrote him a message like directly to him, and I said, "Hey, is everything okay? It seems like you're really angry and upset a lot of the time." He goes, "No, this is just how we talk where I'm from."
Yeah.
And I got into a conversation with him and I said, "Look, in my group, you have to be polite. That's my rule. And I need you to be polite in order to stay. If you're not polite, I'm going to have to kick you out." And he was polite for a couple more days and then he disappeared. Never heard from the guy for 6 months. Comes back and he goes, "Garrett," and he called me by my pseudonym, but he's like, "You changed my life. Like I stopped swearing, I stopped being rude to people, and I started being nice to them. And oh my God, my life is completely like 180 degrees better than it was before." And
Mm-hmm.
I just felt so warm-hearted that I could have that positive impact on someone. And I want to have that impact on more people. And I want
Yeah.
all of us in this room to have that impact on more people. I don't want you to be afraid, Mandy, but I do want you to be conscious to be polite, not
Yeah.
because not because I want to have superiority of my English over you. And I do know what you're talking about the class-based system in the UK, but I will
Yeah.
give you a little hint, Mandy. For what it's worth, as long as you're not swearing, if you speak with a British accent, you're considered over 120 IQ, hands down in the US. You are absolutely the smartest person in the room if you have a British accent. So that's just how we roll here.
Bloody hell.
Yeah,
Thank you so
yeah,
much.
no
But I did,
worries.
yeah, it is, and I think that you sharing that, thank you so much for sharing your story. I think if we can go out now into our neighborhood, our neighbors
Yeah,
and stuff like that, and people who are different from us, we can also show them that, hey, we come from the same place. Like some,
yes,
and then, hey, because we don't get access to healthcare, we don't get access to so many places when we're talking in such a rough way.
yeah.
And then it just creates more hate.
Exactly. And when we speak that way, we bring negativity, we attract negativity to ourselves because we're putting out negative language. And what does that do? It makes people upset. And so then they reflect that negativity back to us. So that's not productive for our own mental and physical well-being. So much better to be polite in all cases, and people will always be more open-minded to you if you're polite. The other thing, oh shoot. Oh, the other thing I was going to say is I agree with you 100% about befriending people in our neighborhoods. And I've tried to do that, for the last like 20 years. When I was in New York City, I had my neighbors over for wine and whiskey, because some of them, long story short, they were Orthodox Jews, and I wasn't allowed as a non-Orthodox Jew to pour certain types of wine with them. And there's all these rules. So sometimes we just had whiskey. It was simpler. But I tried to buy wine that I could pour. So, but I think it's important to build those relationships with people in our community. And for anyone interested in talking about becoming a member of the FTI, I would love for people to join the FTI as a member and then create what we call pods, which is a community of people in your community that are local that can meet in person. And you get to know each other at a very deep level. I have a whole process for getting to know each other at a very deep level that that we use in the FTI. And Lynn can attest to this, that, we've gotten to know each other really well with the personal profiles, haven't we, Lynn? What do you think?
Yes.
I don't mean to lead you with the question. I shouldn't have done that, but
That's okay.
you can give your objective opinion. So, um, yeah, I would, consider joining for anyone interested in sort of creating that kind of new friend circle. It never hurts to have an extra group of friends. Um, thank you, Mandy. And Ari, go ahead.
Uh, Garrett, first I want to say I really appreciate what we're doing here and your leadership. I'm kind of getting interested in the idea of joining the FTI, except that I am dedicated to being a father full time for the most part. So I'm not exactly sure how much I can contribute, but who knows? It's something I'm willing to explore.
Please consider it. It doesn't take a lot of time, Ari. It's an hour a week.
Well, I've already considered it. It's the next step is some sort of making some sort of commitment.
Got it.
Yeah, an hour a week I can do. That's fantastic. And specifically this conversation we're having right now, is, in my humble opinion, the way to fight terrorism. Having these things, really trying to create the conditions for people to feel more like they're not desperate and that they don't need to lash out. And I produced, as everybody's speaking, I wrote some things that I'd like to share um, that are going to sound like, or maybe they'll not. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to sound. That's where I don't want to assume how it'll be perceived, but I can imagine that it'll be like I'm really attacking you, but at the same time, I really appreciate and highly value, 99% metaphorically of what you're saying, but maybe there's a few things that can have some serious improvement. And so I'd like to offer those if that's all right.
Yeah, please.
So first, the thing I wrote was, I think most people already said this about moral high ground. It's a really loaded term. I think it's better to just say be moral, because if you're being moral, that implies that you're taking a stand as a high ground.
Right.
And specifically, this implies it belongs to everyone, while moral high ground implies an ownership, an exclusivity, and it almost reinforces the tribal nature of the problem. And by saying moral, we're able to show that we're willing to explore in a flexible and cooperative way to find solutions that are mutual. And practically, the practical thing that I'm going to say here is this really includes meeting people where they are and not expecting them to come to where you are at, right? We meeting people where they're at. And the implied arrogance is to assume that one knows better than the other, or that we know better than they do, and that this is a fallacy of a rigid ideology. The next thing that I wanted to point out is it's a fallacy to think that human nature is truth-seeking. This is only true under special circumstances. Often human nature or human nature really, I would argue, is to have our experience of reality match up to our story of reality. And truth is often a threat to this. It's a threat to the popular culture and the status quo. Truth is often the unknown, and by nature, humans tend to fear the unknown unless we feel safe. Ontological truth exists, no doubt, but people don't have access to it. We have access to descriptions of reality, not reality, as it's well stated by Daniel Kahneman. If we want to help, it's in the foundations of creating healthy relationships that would then allow people to feel safer, and where they're willing to explore truth, and where people are not feeling like they're backed into a corner to then grasp onto whatever maybe they don't even realize what they're grasping onto. And specifically, it's like saying that we're allowing people to find their own truth, both by modifying their experience of reality and the stories that describe this reality. Next, I wrote about justice, poverty, and education. Truthfully, these are fantastic aspects of the problem, but I think that they're limbs of the creature and not the nature of the creature itself. They are incredibly necessary, but not sufficient, as they address symptoms, but not the essential cause. I believe the essential cause is desperation. Justice, poverty, and education address desperation, but they do not encapsulate its nature. I would assert that belief in a positive and shared future are at the root of desperation. A strong sense of agency and identity are the primary defense against desperation. Justice, poverty, and education help to produce a strong sense of identity, but I would assert what's missing is a sense of belonging. And you've maybe partially said this very nicely as the idea of a community, but I think that's a higher in the the not the Pavlovian, but the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is belonging comes from a sense of community, and belief in the future is not being trapped in the past via tit for tat patterns, and that comes from a willingness to forgive. So if I were to include in your three things, I don't know how to modify it exactly, but this willingness to forgive is a lot of people are talking about with vengeance. If if we're just going to be locked into what people did in the past, then you have the nuclear escalation and tit for tat behavior, and that is easily predictable. And if people have money and they have education and they have justice, but they feel isolated and alone, I think they're still ripe targets for terrorism. And so it's this you pointed out very nicely. The idea of community is a huge defense against it, but I think it's a lot more primal on the as a in the hierarchy, so to speak, of what's really foundational is the strong sense of community.
Cool. Thank you, Ari. I really appreciate those comments. And if I could comment on each one, I would normally have limited you to one, but no one else had hands up, so I just let you go. So, but yeah, moral high ground was already mentioned, but rather than say be moral, I think actually be ethical is a little bit less loaded because morality has sort of been hijacked by religion, and even though they're
Mm,
actually synonyms for each other, but people generally tend to feel a little allergic to the concept of be moral, right? Because they immediately assume someone is going to say their religion is what's moral, and you know, anything other than what their religion says is moral is not moral, and that's not what I
sure.
mean. I mean, be
If you're just going to
ethical.
use like one
Yeah.
has a better connotation than the other, that's
Yeah,
fantastic,
that's all I mean. And so minor
right?
nit that I'm picking, when you say that it's a fallacy to th say that human nature is truth-seeking, you also said human nature is to have our experience of reality line up with our perception of reality. Well, if we're being honest with ourselves, I think that is
Wait, say that again, because I don't think that's what I said. I said our story of reality mixed up with our perception. That's what I was trying to say.
okay.
The story of reality, that's the story we tell ourselves needs to match up with our perception of reality. That's the equation that I was
Okay.
trying to say.
Okay. All I'm saying is I think people do naturally seek truth. I'm curious what fallacy you think I was making, if you can
Oh
pinpoint.
no, it's only under certain circumstances that oftentimes truth is a threat and truth is dangerous. And this is
Well,
why truth is not so universal. People don't want it because it threatens the way they live their life.
so if I could just finish. So like when I say truth seeking, I mean they want to seek objective truth, but yes, people will get mired in confirmation bias and they will disregard all information that doesn't agree with their current beliefs, but they came to their current beliefs while trying to seek truth or trying to make sense of the reality that we're in. So I think, we both agree that, and I'm not saying that everybody is doing a good job seeking truth. I think most people are actually miserably bad at it. Like, I don't know if I should say most, but I would say very many people are miserably bad at seeking truth. But I would argue if you asked everybody on earth, do you do you want to believe what's true is true? I think almost everybody would say yes. 95 to 99%, I think, would say yes. And in fact, the ones that are believing complete misunderstandings to be true would still say yes to that. They just have a misunderstanding.
I want to give a hypothetical that seems like a pretty good counter to this. Let's pretend that the truth of the universe is actually some Native American, exactly mystical practice. If you asked everybody in the world, "Oh, that's truth. Do you want to do that?" They'd be like, "No, I do my life the way it did for the last 50 years. I'm not going to upend and change everything." And so the idea is very clear that people are need to do the things that they're used to, and to ask them to when truth confronts that and specifically l- points out the delusions that we have in our own lives, which we all have to some degree, that is scary and
I
that is
agree.
threatening.
I
And
agree.
so
That's
that's
confirmation
when
bias. You're
truth
just
is
You're just
okay. That's
describing
confirmation based.
you're describing confirmation bias, and you're right. Confirmation bias, I would agree with you that almost all people are mired in confirmation bias, which is why I say that while all people value and want to seek truth, that doesn't mean we're all doing it well. The whole reason that I came up with the first three intentions is to help people get better at seeking truth and being fair. and being able to be open to new
Well,
ideas that
just to throw it back at
counteract.
you, it seems like you're saying is a confirmation bias. Why do you assume that people want truth? There's so much evidence that people don't, right? It sounds like a confirmation bias of your own.
Why don't we do
I would
this?
argue that
Let's
it's
hold on just one second, Ari. Let's have
yeah.
everybody, if you if you believe that you should seek truth in life, put a thumbs up. And if you don't believe you should seek truth in
Wait,
life,
that's a loaded statement. Let me pose it
why?
like this. Do you seek truth if it threatens your way of life, that what you've lived your whole life?
What the hell
Right?
does that
That's what I
mean?
would say.
Now
What
you're
does that mean?
gaming. Now you're basically leading the witness. All I did is say that people have a natural desire to seek truth.
But
And
truth
so,
is ambiguous in this case.
but
It's always at the stake of what the way I like the status quo that I have is not truth to some degree, and every decision needs to be looked at as a opportunity cost, so to speak, right? You can't just tell me what I'm gaining.
why
You
don't we
need to
do
really
this?
also look at what we're
Have
losing.
have people, all I'm saying, Ari, is that everybody will agree we should seek truth. That's all I'm saying. Now, you're saying everybody is mired in confirmation bias, and I agreed with you on that. But I'm still saying everybody agrees that we should seek truth. And let me ask people to do this. Say, seek truth or don't seek truth in the comments about which
Well,
one
why
you
does it
think
have
we
to
should
be
do.
polar?
Well,
You're making it it's
seek,
one or the
say
other.
seek truth, yes or no.
I think
Just say
that's
yes or no.
reductive.
Should we seek truth, yes or no? I mean, either we
That's
should.
too reductive. It's like all or nothing. I think it would be that the reasonable question would be, would you seek a reasonable amount of truth or a partial amount of truth? And not everyone can agree to. But when it threatens like the way you've lived your life and
Again,
everything that you
we're
stand
repeating
for.
ourselves. So I've said what I had to say on that one. Let me go to the next one. So,
Sorry, I think it's like when you say that was Jesus born at Christmas time? He wasn't, but we still believe he was born at Christmas time.
well, you clearly know better, Mandy, and most of us know, like most of us that have studied the history know better. It was, Christmas time for Saturnalia, which is the Roman festival that was convenient for when the Romans decided to adopt Christianity as their religion to put it as the birthday of Christ. But yeah, but the point is, my only point is that everybody seeks truth. And Ari, to your point about let people find their own truth, that's what we do in the FTI. That's why everybody is asked not to believe anything on faith, but to believe it by your own critical thinking skills and your own ability to discern fact from fiction and wisdom from folly. So I don't expect anyone to believe what I say is true. They should judge for themselves if it's true or not. And if they don't agree with me, like I said in the beginning of the meeting, cool, disagree and do your own thing. I'm not going to tell anyone to trust my judgment over their judgment. I'm just going to try to help present things that I think will be useful to people. You don't agree it's useful? Cool. You can disagree and do your own way, right? Everybody is the captain of their own ship. So that said, as far as justice, poverty, and education, I put a source in the chat that shows that terrorists are actually not desperate. They're actually not from like the socioeconomic poor or the uneducated. They're often more educated than the population as a whole. So it's actually not true that they're in desperate situations. What is true is that they get won over by a lot of propaganda, and that's why the education is so important. And the reason that justice is so important is that if you see a bunch of, you know, like people that are, to use the example of Westerners, a bunch of Westerners like in a foreign country that are running around with guns and, shooting people sometimes, like, and sometimes not shooting the right people, like, or killing innocent people with bombs. Well, that's going to make you upset, right? That's not justice. And I do think we should combat poverty, but mostly because combating poverty helps with education and economic opportunities that keep people grounded in society, not because the poor are the ones that are targeted as terrorist recruits, but because like a good economy
Can I
is
say
for everyone.
something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think you did a great job of responding to what you think, where you're elaborating on what basically your confirmation bias of desperation. That is a type of desperation, but I'm trying to describe a more meta level of what's really going on. If you want to almost like put the humanity on the couch like Freud would, to uncover what the unconscious nature of desperation is. And it's really when people feel like they don't have the ability to live the life that they want, which is more related to the sense of agency. And so they could have all the stuff they want, they could have all the education they want, have all the justice they want. But if you're living on an island all by yourself, you're a castaway, right? And so these things are there is a more primal nature of desperation that probably has a long conversation behind it. But I don't like the idea of that straw man that you just presented of desperation.
Yeah, no, I agree with your second definition. And that is a key reason that I think people get recruited to terrorism, although it's complicated and nuanced, and we have a couple of hands up, so I won't go into it in a lot of detail, but I agree
Yeah,
with
we
that
talked about this
definition.
enough. I'm happy to move on and
Yeah.
share the
But
conversation.
I do want to say that combating poverty is a part of, helping people
Absolutely.
not, and so that's
No
why
doubt.
combating
All
poverty is
those,
important.
yeah,
Yeah, cool.
yeah.
iPhones. iPhones, are you still there? You're on mute.
Did you pick on the iPhone?
Yeah, it's your turn.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, we have the topic that we're discussing. I'd like to introduce as I picked up from what Harry was saying. Okay, now when I was a kid, I was in this program, and we lived in it's called a therapeutic community, and you lived there, and we had these seminars, right? And one was called Pro and Con. I was 14 years old at the time. Sometime we would talk about philosophers. This particular one, Pro and Con, is you were given a topic, a certain circumstance in society, and you had to give the pro for 5 minutes with all your heart. You had to give the good sides of this. 10 minutes later, you had to give the con with the same state of mind of the argument. What that did was it fostered objectivity. I didn't realize it until later on in life. Okay, we got Buckminster Fuller, architect, philanthropist, and philosopher. He made the buckyball, that circle of triangles.
Yep.
He says fundamental reality according to an individual's perceived experience. So, what does that say? Everybody has a reality that's filtered through their own their interpretation, not even their experience or history. Okay? Now, I always try to eke something out of these things rather than just do verbiage or repeat it and you're profound. Okay, so what does that tell me? If I realize you got your reality, Harry's got his, and I discuss something with you with an objective state of mind, I'm only going to expand my reality, my perception, because now I've allowed something to come in. What happens with confirmation bias? Then I'll bring it to the guy goes, the rich man goes to the monk, and he says, "Look, I got everything, and I'm empty." He says, "Sit down." He goes and he gets the tea. He starts pouring the tea. He keeps pouring it and it's falling over the cup. And the rich guy says, wait a minute, it's falling all over. He says, exactly. Your cup is full. Nothing can go into it. We have to be with an empty cup. In other words, when we listen to each other, because our natural default is we're going to feel like it's a personal affront. Now we're standing up for something, but we're not allowing. Before the meeting started, I says, I think I'm going to have fun here because you said it's open discussion. And a lot of times what happens is, and I'm just sharing this from my heart. I'm sharing with you what my experience, what I perceived, and what I picked up. And what I pick up has a lot to do with all of my senses, not just my mind, my heart, my soul. Everything is in there, and it's something. Things get snuck in, and this is what a couple of us have been trying to say. So when you go through your whole long talk, maybe at certain instances, if somebody says, "Hey, can you please clarify this?" In other words, you put all of that out, and it's almost like it's an indoctrination because it's bum, 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 and it goes on, and then this point builds on that point. But then it's not an allowance for somebody to come and say, wait a minute, I question that. That's the atmosphere is not happening like that. That's not what's going on. And then you say, it's believe me, I got a PhD in BS. You know how you get a PhD in BS? You stop believing your own first, then you stop doing it, right? Because you realize it's not getting you anywhere and it's got you in delusion. That now you're getting to the
Finish.
professorship. When
Try
you
to
get to
finish
the
your
top
thought.
of the chain, you know what happens? You always recognize it. You don't engage in it in yourself, but you always recognize it. In other words, being a good talker doesn't mean anything if you don't have some meaning, some soul, some emotion, some belief, deep belief in what you're saying. And otherwise, it's just a verbiage, and we go back. What I'm trying to share with you is your formula is very lofty. It's beautiful. It's beautiful, but it's not connected to what's actually going on in the world today. What we're being run by is the oligarch. We don't have a government. But yes, I didn't mean that the other countries don't like us as individuals. They don't like America for
Please
what we
finish up
stand for.
your comments. You've been going for about 5 minutes now.
Okay, well, I don't want to know what do you feel about what I'm sharing with you?
So, I feel like you're upset, and I feel
No, I'm
like,
passionate. I'm not upset. I'm a passionate person.
yeah, you're
I'm not
definitely
upset.
passionate, but
I'm not upset.
okay,
No.
I'm upset over all the things that you're talking
Okay.
about.
So were you
And
just projecting? Were you just projecting when you said I was upset because you were that's what you said about projection? I assure you I'm not, but you thought I was because you're upset. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Bob.
So what I'm upset about is not over what you said. What I'm upset about is all the horrible things that the American government has done and that other governments have done across the world. So I am upset over those things. I am very fine with feedback and I'm fine with, disagreeing with people. I have no problem with that. And as far as like a whole long talk, this was one of the shorter talks at the FTI. I think I was 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes. So normally they can go up to an hour. If you had come for the one where I defended free will, it was about an hour. If you come to a couple of Remcos, we're over an hour, and I maybe an hour and 10 or an hour and 15 minutes.
We
So
might want to consider that because if the audience isn't engaged as it's going down, a lot of times we have to check in on who we're talking to make sure we're on a wavelength. When we
yeah,
don't do that, then it just goes on and on and on, and things don't really lock in. Things
yeah.
don't they
So
don't connect.
I
They
appreciate what
don't.
you're saying. And just so you
Mm,
know, when I started the FTI, if you go back to our recordings of early videos, I did actually have people interrupt with questions along the way. But what would end up happening is we would get sidetracked on that point, and then people would feel like they didn't understand what was being presented. And so the overwhelming feedback I got is don't let people ask questions along the way. Do the
mm,
presentation. If people want to ask a question, they can write down in, a note to say, I'm going to ask about
mm,
this after the presentation is over. And Carrie's got notes. I'll tell you, I've got over a page of notes that I've written. No, over 2 pages of notes that I've written just about tonight, and I'm the one that presented, right? But I've got 2.5 pages of notes because as you were talking, I was taking notes on what you said so that I can properly respond to you. So, everybody's got to learn that taking notes is a good way of dealing with anything. Like anytime you're in a conversation with anyone, you should be taking notes because it's important to let people finish if you have time and you're not under a time crunch with 20 people watching. It's important to let people finish, but then, after they finish, you want to address all the things that they brought up and address them with compassion and humility. And so I agree with everything you were saying, and I wasn't trying to point to you about the projection thing. It was really like for everybody. I think it's so common for me, and it's just, it was something that came up from a number of things that were said throughout the not only tonight but at past events, and so I wanted to bring it up for that reason. I'm sorry if you felt like I called you out.
No, 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 not at all. I understand
Yeah.
what projection means, and I'm well aware of that from my childhood seminars that I
Well,
went to
I
that I
think
shared
those
with you.
seminars,
This is from a child. We had seminars for the pro and con. In other words, that was cultivating objectivity.
Yeah.
See, all too often when we get into a conversation that turns into a skirmish, is that we don't. And Ari hit on it. He hit on that point. Is that we feel so invested in it that our mind closes down,
Yeah.
and
I
at
agree.
that point, there's no communication really. Somebody's
That's
trying to tell you what their perceived reality is,
yeah.
and that's your reality. They're projecting reality upon you. And when you were sharing all these different points in your talk, there was a few things about, we're going to come and we're going to install. But the country, nobody wants us installed in their culture. I'm just saying, you put that in as you were streaming, and in this day
So
and age, we need to,
what I said is install compliant governments, which means
right,
don't, which
right.
is actually a point that you made, which is don't install terrorist governments that don't
No,
have
that's not the point
support.
I made.
Well,
What point I made
you
was
didn't
we
say
should
not to
not be
install terrorist
installing.
governments? Wait,
No, that's not what I said.
I thought you said that about Iran. Like we installed.
I'm clarifying something for you. That's not what I said. What I said
Okay.
was we don't need to be installing anything anywhere, because when we install a government, what happens is now we control them. We did it with the Shah of Iran. We did it in Iraq. We did it in all these places. We did it in with Marcos. These are our people. They say, we don't care what you do to your people. So what happens is the Shah gets
Yeah,
overthrown,
I'm very
and it
familiar.
comes back to us. So
Yeah,
we need to stop installing our our needs and what we want in other places in the world. And if we want to help them, just ask them what they need. Ask them what they need.
right.
We brought
I
milk.
agree. And what I'm saying
We
is ask them the government that they need and then put in place a government.
no. Ask them what they need. We was in Africa and we were bringing milk to them, right? But we brought them powder.
What do you do about a place like Gaza where the government is a terrorist organization?
Okay, guess what? All right, let's ponder that for one moment. What happens in Gaza? What happened in Gaza was little by little occupied lands. There was an agreement, little by little, until they were being ruled and controlled. And they created these things. Guess what? It's a fact that Israel funded Hamas. They funded them in a
I think
circuitous route.
you'll have
Okay,
to give a link for that in the
yeah,
online
check it out.
community. Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say
Go ahead
is,
and give a link for that in the online community because when I fact checked that last time, I
okay, check it
did
out.
not find evidence of that.
You'll find
With
out.
that said,
It
just
was
go ahead and
okay. Let me
prove out
say
your
about the
assertion.
rest of it.
Go into the Discord community. I do need to shut it down because I gotta get to sleep. I've been up since 5 o'clock this morning.
Oh,
And I gotta make sure my kids are asleep as well, which is
yeah.
even more important than me getting
Okay.
to sleep. So I just want to thank everybody for the great conversation, the open mind, the transparently sharing your beliefs, and thank you all for being polite and following our FTI rule. And that's what makes for a good conversation. Because as the guy that was just talking earlier, iPhones is this title was saying, like if we don't say it in a way that people can resonate with and that is polite, they're not going to listen to us. And so it's super important that we say things in a way that will resonate with people, because if we have a good point, then and we're polite about it, then it hopefully will resonate with them. And if it doesn't, then we should be listening with an open mind to what they say and see if that resonates with us. We don't always have to be right, and that is where Ari's right. Almost everybody's mired in confirmation bias. Don't let that be you. Know what confirmation bias is. What it means is that you ignore all the evidence that disagrees with your current beliefs. You should always be seeking out evidence that disagrees with your current beliefs. Don't ignore it. Look for reasons you might be wrong. And like I said, if you admit you're wrong with good judgment, you're immediately right again. You're more right than you were before. The only time you're ever truly wrong is when it's clear to everyone listening that you're wrong and you refuse to admit it. And that is egotism. So, which is, I made another argument that egotism is the root cause of all preventable evil on earth. So, you don't want to be in the egotism realm. And there's lowercase and capital egotism, but we'll leave that for another night. We got some good topics for future events: revenge, jealousy, and injustice slash fairness. I like to, mention things in the positive. It was mentioned as injustice, but I'd like to cover both injustice and fairness because I think both are important. And so thanks again, everybody, for coming and for hanging out to the very end. You guys
Thank you, Garrett.
are the after party crew. So thank you all for being the after party crew tonight, and hope to see you guys back again next week, or at the next week you can attend. Take care,
Peace
everyone.
be upon you all. Good night.
Thanks, and to you.
Good night. Thank you.